Awesome. Good morning, live coders, good afternoon, and hello and good day, wherever you may be. I am Sadukie, and we're going on a data adventure with Azure Notebooks. But before I get too crazy in the content, I want to give a shout out to the live coders team for this opportunity, and thanks to Project Jupyter and Azure Notebooks for giving me something to talk about. All right. So what is Project Jupyter and what is Jupyter Notebook? These are concepts that you're going to need to keep straight. It's easy to mix them all up. So Project Jupyter, think of that, that's the who, that is the people behind the Jupyter Notebook. They're the organization. Jupyter Notebook is the product. And of course, Azure Notebooks is running Jupyter in the cloud. So Project Jupyter initially spun off of the IPython project in 2014, and IPython was interactive computing with Python. Well, Project Jupyter does interactive computing with various programming languages. Jupyter Notebook is the tool we can use to do that interactivity. You can use it for things such as learning and teaching, analyzing data, and presenting data findings. And I'm going to show you what I use it for and give you some cool examples along the way. Now, you're probably wondering, why Azure Notebooks? Azure Notebooks are nice because it's cloud-hosted Jupyter Notebooks. So you don't have to install Jupyter, you don't have to try to figure out how to run it on your machine. It runs right in the cloud. There are other cloud providers, but Azure Notebooks holds a special place in my heart. It's great for presentations like this one. So some people do presentations with PowerPoint or Prezi, but this presentation here is an Azure Notebook. What's nice is it's great for when you're learning new things and taking notes, because you can do things such as putting Markdown like this, and then using an interactive code cell after that. It's also great for interactive languages. So Azure Notebook supports Python, R, and F#. If you're working with Jupyter Notebooks locally, you can install language support for others as well. And then there's also the ability to show data results. So I have a bunch of stories that I will share with you along the way. But as you have questions, feel free to ask in the chat as well, because I'm watching you guys and gals and everyone else. All right. So as I mentioned, this presentation is an Azure Notebook, and this text is Markdown. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. Ta-da! This is what's going on under the covers. So the double number sign, double pound with Y Azure Notebooks, that is an H2 heading. For styling purposes, I reverted back to the whole table format. But then my link down here at the bottom, that is for Markdown. And that points to the file structure. Now what's nice is I'm already in an editing thing, so I could say like Azure Notebooks, cloud hosted might need a hyphen. And if I press Shift Enter, this will render the Markdown. So you can be in a presentation with Azure Notebooks and edit that cell right in your presentation. There's even that interactivity. All right, so demo look at the file structure. Let's take a look and see what's going on under the covers. So I have this open in another tab. Just so you're aware, total transparency, my presentation is running in a browser that's in full screen mode. So in the file structure, you're going to notice a few things. Yeah, you can do that with HTML and then Notebook Insta. And I'll show you a bit more. You're gonna like what I have to show. So the IPyNB files, those are the IPython notebook files. But it doesn't matter if it's a Python language, if it's R, if it's F# or another one. In this case, IPyNB is the Jupyter Notebook extension. I also have the data and images folders, and those are specifically to keep things very organized. It's what I do. The data has the CSV files that I've analyzed for this presentation. You'll see, yes, villagers, items, recipes. There's going to be some Animal Crossing, and ramen ratings, there will be some ramen as well. And then images, I also have that as well. You won't see as many of the images because I actually rely on the code and showing the interactivity of it. there's a README. So if you're familiar with GitHub repositories, which I know many streams have, this is going to seem fairly similar. We have a project, we have the files, we have the README, and I made sure to include things such as where to find Jupyter Notebooks and how do you create the slideshow presentation deal that I'm working with. I've also included some hosted data sets. This is where I find a lot of the data that I work with for presentations. So I made sure to put all of that in the README. Now, much like GitHub or another one of the Git repositories setups, you can clone this project. So I have a link that you can see with being able to follow along as well. That may not be set up. But you can clone this and run it locally, and it should copy all the files over. There we go. Stream elements, thank you. So that link that just got posted in the chat channel, that's what you can use to clone this setup. Now, I'm going to go back to the presentation. All right. So as I mentioned, the presentation is using Azure Notebooks. So the extension it's using is Rise Slideshow. The Rise Slideshow feature is an extension that is included as part of Azure Notebooks. And what's nice about it is it allows us to create slides like this, and it doesn't go forward and backward. Thanks, Daryl Code Stuff. I will double check that link to see why it doesn't work. I had the sharing turned on earlier, but let me double check that, and then I'll make sure to tweet it out and have the Live Coders crew also share that. So the Rise Slideshow, again, as I mentioned, it allows you to go left and right and up and down. It uses reveal.js under the covers, and Microsoft had a really good walkthrough on how to get started with that. Now what's nice is you can go through, maybe you have some learning site, free code camp, maybe you have a Twitch stream going on right now that you want to take notes about. You can have your Azure Notebook in another window, and you can say, okay, I'm going to take notes. And I might want to say that Markdown doesn't need to be bolded. So I can go ahead and remove that. And then again, pressing Shift-Enter goes. Gotcha, Lazamet. Yeah, I will double check the security on that and see what happened with it. And then, like I said, I will tweet that link out for you guys and gals. All right. So let's create a new notebook and look at the interactivity of this. So I'm going to go back to where we were with the files. So when you go to notebooks.azure.com and you create a project, the thing you're going to want to create next will probably be your notebook. So if you go over to the right, there's this button that says New. I'm going to click on that. And then you should see the options for Notebook, Folder, Blank File, and Markdown. We're going to go ahead and look at Notebook. Now, these are the languages that Azure Notebooks currently supports. You're going to see that there's Python 3.5, Python 3.6, R, and F#. And yes, there's an option there for Python 2.7 as well. I'm going to steer you clear of using Python 2.7. They had their last commit in April of 2020. Python 2.7 is a dead end at this point. They're not supporting it. They're not pushing any more updates to it. So if you're using Python 2.7, please try to get over to the Python 3x land. I'm going to create a Python 3x notebook. I'm going to call it Live Coders 2020.ipynb. The ipynb tells it that this is a notebook file. So I'm going to go ahead and click New. Now once I click New, you'll see in the file system that livecoders2020.ipynb was created successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So I clicked on the livecoders2020.ipynb file in the file system, and it loaded the notebook. Now this is what an empty notebook looks like, just started. So I've got what here is called a cell. If I click out of there, you can see that there's a blue border around it. The blue border means it's a selected cell. And if I go in there and double click on it to get a blinking cursor, now it's an active cell. Something else to note is to the left of my blinking cursor, there's a prompt that says in with a square brackets and then a colon. This tells you that this is a code cell. Another way to confirm is there's this drop down here that appears in the shortcuts bar about just below the widgets menu, and right now it's set to code. I can go ahead and change that to markdown. If I change it to markdown, notice that the in prompt goes away. And I want to change that back to code because I want to show you the interactivity part. So flip it back to code. I'm going to click back in the code cell. I don't know why we use math as a demo of making sure this works. Every hello world and math. This is what they do. So 2 plus 2, notice the in prompt, the square brackets now has a number 1. There's an out prompt with number 1. Those line numbers are going to match. It's the input and then the output from that input. There's not always an output. If the code that you put in doesn't have an output, then it's just going to show in. And if you've never programmed Python before, I always recommend checking out Import This. This shows a poem about the language and writing Python code. It's a Pythonic code, or a Pythonic poem called The Zen of Python by the Pythoneer Tim Peters. So if I go ahead and press Control Enter, that's just going to run the selected cell. Pressing Control Enter, when I run Import This, showed the poem. Now you're probably wondering, how do I know Shift Enter, Control Enter? I'm a keyboard user. My mouse slows me down. Can it calculate binary too? I'm sure there's probably a Python library for it, particles. There are so many Python packages out there that make life easy. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's something out there for doing binary calculations. But for those of you wondering how I knew about the keyboard shortcuts in Azure Notebooks, if you go under Help, there's a keyboard shortcuts menu. There are references to various popular Python libraries as well. So if you're doing data science, for example, pandas, numpy, scipy, matplotlib, these are very common packages to know. Their help files are right here at your fingertips. Yeah, this is nice that you can do this right in the browser. And if you're running Jupyter locally, what happens is you're still running in the browser. It runs a web server under the covers that you can then work with their kernels to do that. So if for some reason you want to run this locally and not be on the internet, you can install it and then run with it on your machine as well. But the keyboard shortcuts that I'm using are Run Cell Select Below, that's Shift Enter, and Control Enter is Run Selected Cells. Those are probably the most common ones that I use. And then if I wanted to add a note, I could come in here and I could say insert a cell above or below. I'm going to change this to markdown. I actually know that that is pressing M. M will change it to markdown. Y changes it to a code cell. I don't understand why, but that is what it is. So Anna was asking, does this work with other programming languages too? It does. So we can take a look at what that looks like. Lazymat, so for running machine learning, you're probably going to look at Azure ML instead. Azure Notebook can do things, but because it is a public preview, it's not recommended for production. So I could say something like markdown. This is the Zen of Python, the Pythonic way. So I could type something like that. Oh, and I can't type. I am human, I promise you. Not a robot. There we go. Now, I can go ahead and save this. When I save it, you'll notice up at the top next to the notebook name, it says last checkpoint was a few seconds. So when I save, it also creates this thing called a checkpoint. Let's say I'm working in a notebook, just checking out, see how data looks. I can go back and say, you know what? I don't want to do this. So I could go back to that checkpoint. So let's say I want to type the Pythonic way to survive live coding. And then I'm like, you know, I really don't want to say that. I'm not going to save it. I can come up to File, Revert to Checkpoint, go back to where I last saved. It's going to say, are you sure you want to revert? I'm going to say, sure, go ahead, revert it. I saw a notebook loaded appeared up here in the upper right corner. and you'll notice that the to survive live coding is gone. So checkpoints are nice because you can go back to your different save states. Okay, I'm going to also then show the other question. So Anna asked, does it support other languages? It does. If you're not sure what notebook you're in and what language it supports, I'm going to point out here in the upper right corner, via Azure Notebooks or Jupyter, you'll see a logo for your language if it's there. And then you may also see the kernel name. So what language or possibly what language and version, and that in this case it's Python 3.6. So there's a question from Particles about the revert button is there, but does Control-Z work too? So I'm going to say the Pythonic way to survive live coding. Shift-Enter to render that. Control-Z, not working in there. If I come back in here and then press Control-Z, it works. So you need to be in edit mode for the cell for your Control-Z to work, Particles. Does that help to see it? Oh, you're welcome, Anna. All right, let's get back to the presentation. Okay, so we've got the note-taking. Language support, as I mentioned, Azure Notebooks is Python, R, and F#. Locally, the last time I ran Jupyter on my machine, I saw Python and I saw PowerShell. I don't remember when I installed it, but I also have the PowerShell kernel. But there's this link on this slide. So the slide talks about a good list of kernels. I've looked at that list, and there's things like C#, JavaScript, even the older languages like Fortran has a kernel out there. So if you want to learn Fortran, you can use Azure Notebooks to help you with that. Now, my notebook, in this case, is Python. I'm doing a lot with Python and teaching Python. But I'm going to recommend some of the live coders as well. So if you want to learn more about Python, I'm going to say check out BeginBot. And also something cool he does on his stream is he solves Rubik's Cubes right there on stream. It's really neat to watch. Other people doing Python are CyberBarbie and CodeShow, Beachcasts, Ninjayo, and Mastermind.io. I just checked out his stream last week, or earlier this week, and he was doing Baby Shark in Python. So I included a link to his repo as well, because I thought that was just so cool to see. Yeah, so Daryl Codestuff mentioned that they added a SQLite kernel. You're going to see this Jupyter stuff used in various other Microsoft things. Azure Notebooks has been around at least a couple years. Again, like I said, it's public preview, so. All right, so that's language support. And then note-taking in Jupyter, like I said, you can do straight Markdown, you can do HTML. You could also do LaTeX. So if you're in a math or science application and you need to write equations for some reason, LaTeX is typically the language you use to build those equations. Jupyter Notebooks, the underlying technology, and Azure Notebooks, the hosting technology, both support it using the library MathJax. Rest assured, if you don't know what LaTeX syntax looks like, this link for Jupyter Notebook Markdown cells includes that. I'll give you a sneak peek. Here is that e to the I divided by plus 1. This is what this looks like. Do you think I could remember that off the top of my head? No, I don't deal with LaTeX much. I try to keep it simple. So, that's note-taking. Again, it supports Markdown, so I'm going to give a shout out to talk about Animal Crossing and hats. And no, it does not include Jeff Fritz's hats. We all know C# Fritz, or at least if you don't know him, you should check out his stream. He wears hats for all sorts of things. And so when I saw this, I was like, okay, we need hats. But InstaFluff and Fierce Kitten, Chef Brent, and Noobcat, I got some inside sources saying that you guys play Animal Crossing. Yeah, Insta, I told you it would be in my slides. Look at these hats. Check out these hats. There's a lot of hats in Animal Crossing. I would be curious to see if Fritz would have any of these in his stream. Photoshop Fritz, get him in one of the Animal Crossing hats each week. Just an idea. But what I wanted to show with this is I can double click in here, and this is straight HTML. there's a lot of HTML there, a lot of repetition. But did I mention I'm a developer? I write for loops that can do this HTML for me. I don't know if there's a Cubs hat there, Wheatley. I don't think they have those. Yeah, Fritz needs some of these hats. So this is the ability to embed HTML in the cell. And then the loop I actually wrote to write that code is right here in Python. So I have this Animal Crossing Azure Notebook, and I ended up parsing through a CSV file and then looping through specifically for hats and getting the URL, the name. The images are hosted on VillagerDB. The dataset came from Kaggle.com. That's Kaggle.com. Lots of free data out there. And if you search for Animal Crossing, you will find the one that there's like 5 or 6 different CSV files in it. All right. There's also the Ramen database. So one of the things I like, and this is going back to Insta's, so InstaFluff, he's in the channel right now. So he streams here on Twitch, and his Twitch stream is probably one of the most calm streams I've seen, to the point like I can put his stream on in the background while I'm working and just feel at peace. It's kind of nice. He's got an emote in there, exclamation comfy, and it's usually like you're pulling up a chair, pulling up a comfy, like a beanbag chair or something like that. And he has a thing for mugs, like mugs of cake. Well, for me, it's mugs of noodles. So I like looking at noodles or eating noodles while I'm watching InstaFluff, so that's what inspired me to show you my question about the Ramen Raider database. Yeah, exclamation comfy, that's where it's all about. So Ramen Raider, this guy is a website, and he rates ramen, over 2,500 things last I had seen. But I wanted to see, does the style of ramen, so if it's a bowl or a tray, a cup or a pack, does that make a difference as to how it gets rated? Does the Ramen Raider have a bias towards certain types? And then I looked a little bit further, and there's box, and then there's can and bar. How many of you have had cans of ramen? Or bars of ramen? It always looked weird looking at this box plot. Well, it's definitely, the can is a Pringles can of Nissin chicken ramen, and it's not all that in a bag of chips. It's not even all that in a can of chips. It got 3.5 stars. It's not that great. The bar is a chocolate bar of ramen, and he apparently rated it 5 stars. But does the style impact the ratings? Did not see any biases toward any particular styles. And then of course there's some other data results, because data is awesome. So just so you can see how I import the data, I use pandas. I read in the CSV. Then I typically try to look at the different categories that are there, or the different columns, to see the data, understand the data I'm working with. In this case, this data set has 4,565 items, so that's quite a few items in Animal Crossing. I did a look at the categories to see what's the most populated category, and that's where I saw hats, and I was like, I have to include hats. But furniture has the most, so there was quite a bit of data for there. So then I wanted to know, is there a relationship between buy and sell values for furniture? And sure enough, it looks like it's fairly linear looking at the scatter plot. Then I did the same for wallpaper, and then I realized that wallpaper had some outliers. They had some really far pieces of data. So this was one of those where I filtered it even more, and what's nice is you can see that I did look at the category for wallpaper, and I wanted a sell value of less than 100. Or less than 1,000. I wanted to see a shorter data set, and then create the scatter plot to see those relations. So what's nice is I can look at this right here in my Azure Notebook, and then I can also share it with you folks. Sorry, this is what happens when they put me right before lunch and make everybody hungry for ramen. So this is some of the beauty that we have in Azure Notebooks. I have one more thing I need to show you before I get out of here, so I'm going to exit the Rise show. Like I told you, this is an Azure Notebook under the covers. But the thing we want to do is, because we're using cloud computing, we need to remember to shut down our or things. Otherwise, cloud computing would be a bit in trouble. I'm also going to come out of the full browser mode. I'm going to close my notebook here, close our Live Coders 2020 here, and make sure from my file system, so I am in the project, I'm going to click Shutdown, tell it OK, and now I'm no longer going to be consuming the cloud computing resources. Granted, I'm on the free tier, but if I were on a tier that costs money, I could easily rack up my costs leaving it on and forgetting about it. So, any questions? Well, thank you all.